NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah has dropped his first mock draft of the 2025 NFL draft cycle. We'll be reacting to all 32 picks here, getting his explanation on each of them. And Daniel Jeremiah is one of the most respected insiders within the NFL. He's got contacts across league front offices. And so when he drops a mock draft, it's always one to keep an eye on because he knows how these teams are viewing these top prospects better than almost anybody else around the media. And so it's always interesting to get a look at what these teams are thinking and kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and see how they are viewing some of these top prospects. So we'll jump right in here to the Titans at one, of course. And he does not have a quarterback going at one. He's got Abdul Carter. He says, My ears perked up when Titans president of football operations Chad Brinker said the team wouldn't pass on a generational talent with the first pick. To me, Carter is the best player in the draft and plays a premium position. I could see Tennessee looking to add competition for quarterback Will Levis in the free agent market or later on in the draft. And I think this is absolutely a scenario that could play out. Of course, Chad Brinker, the comments he's referring to the other day, he said that he would not want to pass up on a blue chip guy, quote unquote, wouldn't want to pass up on a generational talent. And most people have interpreted that to mean either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, because as we've talked about before on this channel, the quarterbacks in this class, just none of them are generational. This is just not a quarterback class that is very strong. And so when he was referring to blue chip guys and generational talents, there's really not many of them at any position in this draft class. This is just kind of a weaker draft class overall, but there's certainly, I would say, none of them at the quarterback position. I think that there is not a single guy who is worthy of a generational status at the quarterback position. So if the Titans just want to go with best player available here at one, I think that is certainly a possibility. And I think Abdul Carter would have a very strong argument to be that guy for them. Browns here at two, they've got Travis Hunter. He says quarterback is in play for the Browns, but in this scenario, they pick Hunter, the Heisman Trophy winning two-way star. I'm in the minority as someone who prefers him as a full time offensive player who moonlights on defense. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, he's definitely in the minority there. I would say I'm more so in the majority, playing more so on defense and have just maybe some packages here and there on offense. I think that just makes much more sense for Hunter. I think it would be pretty difficult to play offense full time and then just have some packages on defense. I don't even know what that would look like. It's not really ever been done before in the NFL. I know Daniel Jeremiah referenced it the other day on the Pat McAfee show, talking about some different Patriots players who have kind of done that before, played offense full time and then stepped in on defense here or there. But I just don't really see that happening for Travis Hunter. I think that is just probably not something that plays out. I'm more so like I'm in the majority. Like I said, I definitely see him as somebody who's a full time corner who can just step in maybe in the red zone or just late in games on offense and make some plays for you. Cam Ward here. Giants are desperate for a quarterback. Ward's strong arm and playmaking ability would be a great fit. Absolutely, I agree. I think Brian Daboll would be able to do a lot with Cam Ward, a lot more than he was able to do with Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, whoever else they've had at quarterback. And like I talked about in my first mock draft, the Giants are pretty much pigeonholed into drafting a quarterback. I don't see a scenario where they don't. The only way is if the quarterbacks go 1 and 2, and then the Giants are kind of stuck without one. That would obviously be worst case scenario for New York. And if you're a Giants fan, you got to hope that doesn't happen. They could, of course, trade up as well. We'll see. Weaker quarterback class. I don't know how interested they are in doing that, but if you got to take one, you got to take one. So Patriots at 4, and he's got them going Will Campbell. Patriots must help Drake May on the offensive line. I see Campbell as a safe, steady player who is still improving. Yeah, I think this is absolutely true, and I do think that Patriots absolutely have to upgrade the O-line. I think the argument here, though, is Will Campbell worth taking at 4 when he's probably not going to stick at tackle in the NFL long term? I think that's something that's really interesting. I think you think back to Quentin Nelson, was a guard who went at 6, and Quentin Nelson was a generational guard prospect, and he only went at 6 overall. So it's like, do we see a guy go higher than that who's probably playing guard at the next level? I love Will Campbell. I think he's going to be a great guard at the NFL level, but I don't know if he goes this high. I think teams will just really devalue him based on the arm length, and I think he will go outside the top 5 probably, even though he is a very, very good O-line prospect, and the Patriots desperately need O-line. Jags at 5, he's got Mason Graham. Graham is one of the cleaner evaluations in the draft. He provides unbelievable quickness, balance, and instincts. agree with everything there. I mocked Graham to the Jags. I think that's been mocked a lot. I think the fit makes a ton of sense if he's available at 5, and he absolutely is one of the cleaner prospects in this draft. I think he is a home run for whoever gets him, even if D tackle's not your biggest need. And next up, we got Shedeur Sanders. Was wondering when he would go off the board. Goes off the board here at 6. Tom Brady, now a partner in the Raiders ownership, is someone who would appreciate Sanders' toughness, accuracy, and decision making. Absolutely. I think Brady has a connection with Shedeur Sanders, and so this would definitely make sense. This could even be a spot where the Raiders maybe trade up just to ensure they can get Shedeur Sanders if they think maybe somebody else might be interested in taking him. Maybe I know another team trades up to 4 with the Patriots or 5 with the Jags. Maybe the Raiders are scared of that and they try to move up. But yeah, I could definitely see Sanders and to the Raiders. I think that's been his most common fit, the place he's been mocked to the most in these mock drafts. I mean, it's been talked about for a long time, basically since the beginning of this college football season. There was the tweets that everybody's suspecting he was tweeting every time the Raiders lost, and everybody was trying to make that connection that he was wanting to go to the Raiders, and maybe he does. I could definitely see that. I could definitely see that fit happening. Pete Carroll now there in Las Vegas, so that would be really interesting. Pete Carroll, there's been some rumors of a Russell Wilson reunion, or I could see him just going down the veteran quarterback route, whether that's Russ or somebody else. So we'll see here. But I think Shedeur would be a great pick for them if he's available at 6. Absolutely, they need a quarterback. So this is the first really interesting one here that I think is a little bit of a curveball. We got Tyler Warren at 7 to the Jets. Warren is one of my favorite players of this draft. He will be popular with his quarterback and running backs as a difference-making inline tight end. Yeah, absolutely. Warren is one of the best tight end prospects we've seen in quite some time in terms of a true traditional blocking tight end. Of course, Kyle Pitts went at 4, but he was more of a big receiver and also just hasn't panned out. So, yeah, I think Tyler Warren is definitely a guy who could go higher than people expect. Tight end, not the most valuable position in the NFL, but he just does everything so well and then more. He does things that, you don't even ask tight ends to do. He could play wildcat quarterback, or he can line up in the backfield as a fullback or a running back. And so I think he would be a really interesting pick for a lot of teams. The Jets would definitely be really interesting because they obviously need a quarterback as well, but there isn't one on the board here to take. And I think if they run it back with Aaron Rodgers, I think he would not mind having Tyler Warren at all. Carolina Panthers, Teteroa McMillan. Panthers continue to build around Bryce Young with a big, rangy, and athletic receiver in McMillan. He will be a red zone menace. Agree. This would be a really fun pick if you're a Panthers fan. I think if he's on the board, you take him, absolutely. I don't know if he makes it to 8. We'll see come April. But the Panthers do desperately need defense, though. I mean, they need a lot of defensive help. They were very, very poor last year, but Teteroa McMillan is such a good prospect, probably the last blue chip prospect in this mock draft that's available. And so you take him, even if receiver might not be the biggest need for you. And that's just a really fun pairing with him and Bryce Young. Saints up next here at 9, Michael Williams. Saints continue to add young athletic players to their defensive front. Williams played hurt all season long, but his tools are exceptional. Yep, this is absolutely a Saints pick here. You look at the past drafts for the Saints and how they have looked at defensive line, they definitely value traits very highly. They don't necessarily value production the highest. They don't take that into account, over everything else. They usually go traits, height, weight, speed, athleticism. That is what they value most. And of course, there is going to be a new head coach in New Orleans at time of recording, still not hired their head coach. So we'll see how their philosophies are. Mickey Loomis is still going to be the GM though. So I still see them drafting pretty much the same way they have been the past, several years now. Bears at 10. Another curveball here, one I have not seen go this high. Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama. I think Booker is one of the safest picks in this draft. He will firm up the interior offensive line for Caleb Williams. This is a really interesting one. I would love to, if I could ask Daniel Jeremiah, ask him, is this something that is more of his evaluation, or is this something that he is hearing around the league in terms of Tyler Booker? I, I think based off of this first sentence, this is probably a little bit of his own evaluation. But who knows? I mean, this might be something that is talked about amongst league circles. Maybe Tyler Booker will go higher than people anticipate. And I do think he's a very safe prospect. If you're looking for a guard, absolutely he'd be a great pick, end of first round, early second. I don't know if he's a good pick here at 10, but if you like the guy, you take him. So you don't want him to fall further than your picks. So San Francisco 49ers here, Armand Membu. Membu is the most technically sound offensive lineman in this class. Reminds me of Elijah Vera Tucker when he entered the league. Membu will be an exceptional guard who can also play tackle if needed. So he does have him listed as an interior offensive line here. That's interesting. I think he could play tackle. Membu is reportedly going to have long enough arms to be able to stick at tackle at the next level. So he is shorter. He's 6'3", but I think arm length is the more valuable trait. So if he's got that, then I think he'll be able to stick at tackle. But I think this pick makes a lot of sense. I think this is a pick where maybe he plays guard for the first 2 or 3 years and then slides out to tackle. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, yeah, if Daniel Jeremiah thinks he's going to be a guard at the next level, probably a decent chance he will be a guard at the next level. So I kind of, like I said, he knows what's happening around league circles and how they're talking about these prospects. So if he thinks Membu is an interior offensive lineman, that means there are at least some teams who are thinking that as well. Cowboys at 12 here, Ashton Jeanty, of course. I know I'm not the first to make this connection. I'm sure I won't be the last. Jeanty is one of the more enjoyable players to study in this class. He has elite vision and balance, offering a massive upgrade in Dallas. Absolutely agree. He would be a major, major upgrade within that offense. And of course, everybody's going to say running back, not valuable. Just build up the O line and then just take a random running back in the 5th round and you'll be fine. But that's not always true. You can't just find these good running backs late in the draft. That doesn't work like that. And I think, yes, you generally want to upgrade the offensive line, then get your running back. But I think the Cowboys have an okay line. They're young, they're developing. And I think if you get them an absolute lightning rod like Ashton Jeanty, that will be able to help this offensive line develop even more. He will help them out. They will help him out. It'll be a nice pairing in Dallas, and it'll provide a lot more juice to this offense that they have needed the past several years. Dolphins at 13, Kelvin Banks out of the University of Texas. Nothing is more important than for the Dolphins than protecting Tua Tagovailoa. Banks could do that at tackle or guard. So he does have Banks listed at tackle, so that is interesting. He's another one like Membu. I wondered if he would think of Banks as a guard or as a tackle. Got him at tackle, but he does mention that he could play guard. And I think that's kind of the sense around the league is that he could play either. And I think positional versatility is something that I think is being valued more and more, within offensive linemen. I think you're seeing position versatile linemen get drafted higher and higher every year. And I love that. That's one of the traits that I really value. And, if I was running a team, that's definitely something that I would try to target because I think being able to play different positions in a pinch because injuries happen all the time on the offensive line, I think is a really, really valuable thing. So Banks would be a great pick. Yeah, absolutely. Dolphins need to keep Tua upright. So offensive line certainly makes sense at 13. Colts at 14, Jahdae Barron. I think you'll see the buzz around Barron continue to grow. He possesses great quickness, instincts, and ball skills. It's an interesting one. I have not seen him go this highly, and I've certainly not seen him go higher than this next pick, Will Johnson. Will Johnson, definitely a cemented top 10 pick from what I've seen. A lot of people have him within the top 7 even. Jahdae Barron, more towards the back end of the 1st round. So to see Barron go ahead of Will Johnson is really interesting. I think Barron is a guy I'd be interested to see, do teams view him more as a nickel or more as a boundary? I think if you view him as a nickel, he could be a really, really, really good nickel, but it's not as valuable position. I think it is really valuable. I think, because teams are playing nickel all the time now, but teams still don't draft nickels very highly. I mean, you look at Brian Branch, lasted all the way to pick 45, and he's now one of the best nickel corners in the league. And he's had to play safety as well, and he does that really, really well too. So it'll be interesting to see where Barron goes. I think teams will look at the Chiefs drafting Trent McDuffie. McDuffie having a lot of success inside and out. McDuffie started off in the nickel and now has been pushed outside due to injuries and poor play from some of the other corners on the Chiefs roster. And he's doing really well on the outside as well. So that could definitely help Jahdae Barron's draft stock. And that's an interesting pick. I think the Colts need secondary help. So that's a good pick for them. Falcons at 15, Will Johnson. Johnson is a polarizing player around the league. He provides size and production, but some questions emerged about his tackling and top speed in 2024. So that's really interesting. This is by far the lowest I've seen Johnson go. But like I said, Daniel Jeremiah is one of the most connected people in the league, and so if he's got him sliding all the way to 15, there's got to be some truth behind that. I think if he's mentioning tackling and top speed, I bet he's not just saying that because that's what he's watching on tape. He's probably saying that because he's hearing that from teams, as that's some red flags that teams are mentioning, talking about Will Johnson. So it's really interesting. Going to have to see how he tests in terms of the speed at the combine, the tackling. That kind of is what it is at this point. His season's been evaluated, so you can't really do anything to change that. But hopefully, for his sake, he can measure up well at the combine if he even tests. I'm not sure. He had an injury late in the season, so it'll be interesting to see if he even tests at the combine. Cardinals at 16, Jalen Walker. Walker's a bit undersized as an edge rusher, but he offers an intriguing mix of length, explosiveness, and playmaking ability. I think this would be a great pick for the Cardinals here. Would certainly make sense based off of their drafting history. They love just these positionless linebackers who can slide all over the field. Sam, Will, Mike, rush the passer. You think about Isaiah Simmons. He was like a safety linebacker hybrid. Zaven Collins is kind of similar to Jalen Walker. He's an edge rusher, off ball hybrid. And so Cardinals get another guy similar in that mold. Just a very, very good athlete, very explosive, as Daniel Jeremiah says here, and I think this would make a ton of sense for the Cardinals. Bengals, Walter Nolan. Nolan is a dynamic interior disruptor, would be a part of a key turnaround under new Bengals defensive coordinator Al Golden. Yeah, I think this would be a great pick. Bengals certainly have to go defense, you would think. I know some people might want them to go receiver because it'd be a really fun pick, or go offensive line because yes, their offensive line has been really bad under Burrow, and I think that would make sense. But I mean, their defense was historically bad last year, was the reason that they missed the playoffs. So I think just getting the best player available on defense makes a ton of sense. Is that Walter Nolan? I personally disagree. I think Kenneth Grant is better, still on the board. I think some of these other guys that are on the board would be better picks, but Walter Nolan's is certainly an interesting prospect, and I think he would help the Bengals defense absolutely. So Seattle Seahawks, Kenneth Grant. Mike Macdonald looks back to his old stomping grounds at Michigan to select Grant, who would be a part of a great interior trio with Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy. Keep in mind that Jaron Reed and Jonathan Hankins are headed for free agency. Yeah, this would be a great pick for Seattle, would make a lot of sense based off of their drafting history. And yeah, everybody, myself included, has made the Kenneth Grant to the Chargers connection, based off of Jim Harbaugh. But it's easy to forget Mike Macdonald was the defensive coordinator at Michigan under Jim Harbaugh for a couple of years. So this pick would make a ton of sense. Another connection there. And Kenneth Grant is a freak athlete, and Seattle loves to draft those, whether it's a D tackle, edge, linebacker, safety, corner. They just love athletes. And so this would make a ton of sense. Buccaneers at 19, Jahad Campbell. They rave about Campbell's leadership and versatility at Alabama. He's a unique player because of his size and length as an off-ball linebacker. With Levante David and KJ Britt ticketed for free agency, the Bucs fill a need. Yeah, I love this pick here. Jahad Campbell, I think, that he mentioned Will Johnson being a polarized player. I think Jahad Campbell's a polarizing player. And I'm glad to see that Daniel Jeremiah thinks he's a first round caliber player, because I certainly think that watching his tape. But I know some people, like PFF, has Jahad Campbell graded pretty low, mid second round grade. But I really think Jahad Campbell is worthy of a first round pick. I really, really like him. I know you might watch it and think back to Devin White, who went to the Buccaneers at 5 in his draft. I think it was 2019 draft. I can't remember exactly, but and of course he had a good rookie year, but then just didn't really pan out after that. And there's certainly shades of that in Jahad Campbell, but I don't want people to think that that's a one-for-one comparison. Even if you might see some similarities, I think Campbell's the better player. I think he can be able to provide more overall than what White did. White was just pretty much purely a thumper. I think Campbell can also rush the passer as well, be a really, really good blitzer, obviously play really well in the run game. Campbell will need to improve in coverage like Devin White, and so of course you might get scared if you're a Bucs fan taking Campbell here, but I really think he's a great player, and I think he'll turn out better than Devin White did for sure. Broncos at 20, Nick Emanwari, safety from South Carolina. Emanwari gave me some Derwin James vibes when I studied him. I love his instincts and production. Really interesting one. This is probably the first time I've seen him go in the first round in a mock draft, especially this high. I've seen maybe one or two where he snuck in at, pick 31 or pick 32, but this is a really interesting pick here. And I think, getting comp to Derwin James, that is very, very high praise from Daniel Jeremiah. And Like I said, I don't think he's just randomly throwing out comps, and I don't think he's just randomly throwing out this fit here at 20. I think that there's probably got to be some steam behind this, and be interesting to see how high Eman Worry goes come April. Steelers at 21, Matthew Golden. I don't think the Steelers could go wrong drafting Golden or Ohio State's Emeka Egbuka here. They go with Golden in this case, but they are both professional route runners with outstanding hands and toughness. Yeah, I love Matthew Golden. I love Emeka Egbuka. They're both really, really talented prospects, and I think are absolutely worthy of a first-round pick. Only thing I'll add, I said this in my first mock draft, I just don't think the Steelers draft a receiver. They just have never done it under Mike Tomlin and that regime. I don't see that changing. I mean, I know they need it. Receivers by far their biggest need. They just never do it though. I mean, it's like them and the Packers. They just never draft a receiver in the first round. And is this the everybody thinks, oh, this is the year that's going to change? Maybe it is. Daniel Jeremiah knows a heck of a lot more than I do, so maybe this is the year that they finally do it. Chargers at 22, Colston Loveland. Chargers need to give Justin Herbert more firepower. Coaching staff will be extremely familiar with what Loveland brings to the table. Yep, Jim Harbaugh connection here, mocked to the Chargers a lot across the media, but it makes sense. I mean, they do just need more playmakers. You know, Colston Loveland's not like a traditional tight end, but he's also not like a traditional receiver either. Like he's kind of a big slot, but I think could play on the outside a little bit at receiver, and can obviously play in line like on third and fourth downs and things like that when you're asking him to go out and run routes and things like that. I think if he improves as a blocker, he would be a scary, scary player. I think he would be very, very good in this league. But even if he doesn't, I think just as a pure pass catcher playmaker, he's worthy of a late first round pick, and he'll be a good player at the next level. And yeah, Chargers absolutely just need playmakers, so this pick makes sense. Packers, Shamar Stewart. Packers love front seven players from the SEC with outstanding traits. Stewart fits the mold. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Packers certainly love to draft in this mold. They don't always look at production, they look at traits very heavily along the D line. There might be some concern with this pick. I don't know. When you think back to the Packers' last pick, Lucas Van Ness along the D line, I should add, he hasn't really panned out. He was kind of a traitsy guy, low production in college. And, people had high hopes for him. I think he got picked 13th or 14th, and he just hasn't really panned out too much. So it's one of those, does the team continue to draft that way despite the fact that it hasn't worked the past couple of times? Or does the team just stick with what they know? They stick with their drafting patterns. Knowing the Green Bay Packers, they probably just stick with how they've always drafted. I think that this pick makes a lot of sense here. Vikings at 24, Malachi Starks. Starks didn't make as many plays as we're accustomed to seeing from him in 2024, but people at Georgia rave about his intangibles, leadership, and work ethic. He has the versatility to play over the top or cover the slot. This is really interesting. Starks, not the first safety off the board here, has him going behind Nick Emmanwori. You know, that's a really interesting. I do agree that 2024 for Starks wasn't as good as 2023, but man, I mean, Starks is just a great player, and I think what he's saying here is true. Absolutely. Intangibles, leadership, work ethic. That's all I've ever heard about Starks, in terms of from Kirby Smart and the rest of that coaching staff and other Georgia players. And I think you watch Georgia's defense, like I mentioned in my first mock draft, they have a ton of NFL talent on that defense, whether in this draft class or next draft class. But you watch and he pops out amongst all of that. So it's really interesting to see him slide to 24. I don't know. I don't take, a slight decline in 2024 too seriously. Who knows? Maybe some teams will take it much more seriously, and maybe he won't even be the first safety off the board. Who knows? But it's really interesting. Daniel, like I said, Daniel Jeremiah knows a lot more than I do, but I'd be really shocked if Starks wasn't the first safety off the board. Houston Texans at 25, Luther Burden, another guy who's slid quite a bit. Texans are in the market for a new offensive coordinator, but they could use some more help at receiver too. Burden reminds me of Stephon Diggs, who is headed for free agency. Yeah, I mean, if Luther Burden is available here at 25, that would be an amazing pick for Houston. I don't know if Burden gets past Dallas and Denver and the Chargers, because all those teams I could absolutely see taking Burden. So, but if he's available, I mean, this would be a home run pick for Houston. Yeah, I absolutely think receiver is going to be a need for them. The only way I think they don't go receiver in round one is if like somehow Burden, Egbuka, Matthew Golden are like all off the board, then maybe they won't go receiver. But Houston really needs to look at receiver pretty heavily. And I think if Burden's on the board, like I said, that'd be an amazing pick for them. Rams at 26, Josh Connerly. I'm still getting used to seeing the Rams make first round picks make picks in the first round after their 7 draft gap from 2017 to 2023. The team poured resources into the defensive line in the last draft. They flipped the script and take care of the offensive line in the first round this year. Yeah, I love this pick. This pick makes a ton of sense. It's exactly what I had in my first mock draft. I had Connolly to the Rams. And yeah, I think would be a great pick. I think Rams need to get younger along that offensive line. And so this pick makes them do that. Ravens at 27, Azariah Thomas. The Ravens double dipped on drafting big, long corners after selecting Nate Wiggins last year. Thomas is a smooth, fluid athlete. Absolutely. Azariah Thomas is an athlete, and you look at Nate Wiggins last year, thought was an interesting pick. Was a guy who started off a little bit slow, but he really did pick it up towards the end of the year. I think really fit into that Ravens culture. He's a guy that if maybe he got drafted somewhere else, he might not have panned out super well. And of course, I'm just talking about his rookie year. Like, who knows what the future holds for him. But I think that Ravens culture really helped Wiggins, and I think it would really help Azariah Thomas. I think the fit makes a ton of sense. Azariah Thomas is already doing really, really well. Combine hasn't even started, and he's already raising his draft stock. He is at the Shrine Bowl, and he measured in with over 10-inch hands, which is crazy. That was by far the most for a defensive back. So that definitely will help his draft stock, and I absolutely could see the Ravens taking him here. Lions at 28, Mike Green from Marshall. It'll be a huge for the Lions to get Aiden Hutchinson back next season. Green would be a perfect complement with his speed and quickness off the edge. Team values production off the edge, and Green had a ton of it during his college career. Yep, absolutely. He had a ton of production at Marshall. The Lions do value production over traits generally. It'd be interesting to see. I don't know if they would do this or not, just because Mike Green is a little bit smaller than the edge rushers they've drafted in the past. A little bit small, maybe for a 4-3 edge rusher, but the production is off the charts. And if the Lions get him in a pre-draft interview and they really like his personality, I could see this pick happening absolutely, because Lions want to get their guys in the building. They've two things they value the most is production and personality. So Commanders at 29. Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Commanders' offensive line has played well above expectations, but I think they need to upgrade the talent to protect Jaden Daniels going forward. Agree 100%. I talked about it in my mock draft. This is a team that is played for the NFC Championship, obviously ended up losing to the Eagles, but you look at the roster on their talent, and goodness, said that backwards. The talent on their roster, and they don't really have a ton of it. I mean, they have some guys here and there for sure. And, along that offensive line, Sam Cosmi is a great player, but he just tore his ACL in the divisional round against the Lions. So who knows if he's ready to go by week 1 of 25. So this would be a great pick here. I had Josh Simmons going all the way up at 9 in my mock draft. So I'm really high on him. I think he has the potential to be the first tackle off the board. I think if it wasn't for the injury, he absolutely would be the first tackle off the board. But Daniel Jeremiah's got him going all the way down at 29 here. So maybe the injury is a bigger deal than what we think. Maybe teams are a little bit skeptical about Josh Simmons, about his injury that he had this year. Bills at 30, Derek Harmon from Oregon. Harmon is a very disruptive player at a deep position in this year's class. He could fill a void with Austin Johnson among the Bills' defensive line due to hit free agency this offseason. Yeah, I think this would be a really, really good pick for the Bills here. Derek Harmon's an interesting one. I've seen some people have him as high as like 15 or 16, and some people are like not even until the end of the second round. So he would be a really interesting one. I think he's a great player, and he would fit along that D line right alongside Ed Oliver, would come in and be a really, really great player. I think looking at that Chiefs game, of course, they lose to the Chiefs again. I think you can never go wrong with drafting D-line. Trying to get more pressure on Patrick Mahomes is never a bad thing. And so hopefully Bills are able to do that with this pick here. Maybe they can make a difference next time they play them, because they'll probably end up seeing him in the playoffs again, probably next year or year after. So Eagles at 31 here. TJ Sanders, another D tackle. There's not been a lot of buzz for Sanders, but I thought his tape was outstanding. He's really twitchy and would fit right in with the bevy of talented defensive linemen in Philly. Yep, Eagles always go line. I mentioned that in my mock draft. Whether it's offensive or defensive line, they really just like to stack these guys and then let them kind of ease into it their rookie year. Maybe they don't play at all, or maybe they just play a little bit here and there. And then second year, they just explode out of nowhere and they become Pro Bowlers, all pros. That's just how the Eagles do it. That's why they've been so successful under Howie Roseman. He is a great general manager and has the ideal drafting strategy, it seems like. I mean, in terms of line play, at least, because he has consistently drafted the best offensive linemen, best defensive linemen. And of course, some of that goes into their coaching staff as well, developing those guys. But I think this is TJ Sanders. I think if he went to the Eagles, he would just be another one of those D linemen who ends up working out really, really well for him. So, Chiefs at 32, James Pierce Jr. Some people see Pierce going earlier in round one. While there might be a debate about where he'll land in the draft, there's no doubt about his elite speed and productions. Yeah, I think James Pierce Jr., he's another kind of polarizing one, I guess is the word you would use. He started off before the college football season as like top 5 draft pick potential. Got off to a slow start, but did pick it up towards the end of the season. Now it's like everybody's just kind of all over the place with him. Some people are like, "Oh, top 10 pick." Some people are like, I don't even know if I would take a first round pick on him." So it's really, really interesting. I think he's definitely worth a first round pick. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I think drafting him about in the 20s to late teens, I think is probably a good spot for him to be. But Daniel Jeremiah has him going all the way back to 32. So maybe some teams have some doubts about Pierce. So that was Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft of the 2025 cycle. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the comments letting me know what you guys thought, good, bad, or ugly. And I will make sure to link this article in the description along with Daniel Jeremiah's Twitter as well. Make sure to go check him out. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of other mock drafts throughout this cycle. And like I said, he's one to keep an eye on if you want to keep up with the NFL draft and all these prospects. So, all right. Hope you guys have a great one. Peace.